Welcome back. It's been another one of those weeks that seems like it's been a month. On Monday, the Washington Post reports President Trump shared classified information with the Russian ambassador and foreign minister in the Oval Office. On Tuesday, the New York Times reveals Trump asked FBI director to drop the investigation into his national security advisor, Michael Flynn. On Wednesday, the Deputy Attorney General appoints a special prosecutor to investigate the Trump campaign's contact with Russia. On Thursday, the president tweets he is the victim of the single greatest witch hunt in American history. Joining us for more is Christian Ziegler, the Republican State Committee man for Sarasota, Zach Anderson, political reporter for the Herald Tribune, and Rita Ferrandino, the former chairwoman of the Sarasota Democratic Party. And Zach, I'm going to start with you because you did a great story today. There was the Republican Club meeting yesterday. You had the legislators who were there today, and they were asked by our Fred Rod Thompson about the Trump situation, and all of them were very supportive of the president, including Representative Alex Miller, who said, if it was not this, it would be something else. The media is just after him. It's a witch hunt, and it always will be continuously throughout his entire term. They'll just pick away at him.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear her echo Trump and use the term witch hunt. I think there's a bunker mentality right now within the party. It's sort of just a very defensive mentality when you're being attacked. I think that's natural. You know, you pull in and you kind of hold back and you wait to see what happens a little bit. And they're defending the president, and I don't think that is unusual. I think that they want to see him succeed. Republicans, you know, they had 8 years of Obama. They're anxious to get their team on the field and to accomplish some things, tax reform, health care reform. So I think that, you know, we're going to see people continue to defend the president and the Republican Party for now until you really see him have some serious issues and some real evidence come out that there was something going on with this Russian.
Christian, I would imagine our great Republican loyal viewers are sitting here tonight saying, you're darn right. And I would imagine that our very loyal Democratic viewers are saying, are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is, I mean, all this is doing right now is I truly believe that it's a coordinated effort by four groups. You have the Democratic Party, you have the establishment, includes some Republicans within D.C., those that are trying to protect the status quo in Washington, and then you have the media that's really pouring gas on the flame. And that's what we're seeing, and it's mobilizing both sides.
Zach, have you been to one of those coordination meetings?
No, I mean, yeah, okay, Alan, I mean, there's a Harvard study that just came out today. Harvard, okay? You guys love to, you know, reference these studies. And you look at the negative tone, when you look at articles that have a negative tone. CNN, 93% of their stories about Trump are a negative tone. NBC, 93%. CBS, 91%. Overall, 80% of all the media. That's a Harvard study showcasing exactly what the media is doing. And what they do is they align with the Democrats and they give them bullets and they give them ammo. And that's what the media is in business to do.
So I've got to just say that I have never gotten bullet points from the media. I want to say what we really are supposed to be talking about here is what Donald Trump did,
these
not
are facts. This is
what
a study.
the media is saying. We're talking about the reason Donald Trump is in the position that he's in today is because Donald Trump asked the head of the FBI to stop investigating Michael Flynn.
No,
that is undue justice.
Actually, here's a quote directly from James Comey, and I think this is a very relevant quote. And this is on May 3rd.
We just saw
if we were told to stop something for a political reason, that would be a very big deal. It has not happened in my experience.
That is not.
That was May 3rd from James Comey's mouth himself.
You just heard what Alan Cohn read and showed that happened at the top of the hour.
Well, then he's lying when he gave his testimony on May 3rd because he was not asked to stop an investigation.
I did read a story out of Washington yesterday saying that part of the defense that is coalescing among Republicans is to blame the media for this. There are Republicans, and including you know, Lindsey Graham, including John McCain, a lot of folks on Capitol Hill who are saying these are serious questions that are being raised here.
And like I mentioned earlier, you do have some establishment Republicans that want to protect status quo in Washington. If you remember during the campaign, Lindsey Graham and John McCain were very anti-Trump during a good portion of the campaign. So it's humorous when you see the media. It really discredits the argument when you start referencing Republicans that did not support Donald Trump throughout the campaign.
But let me just ask you one more question. Do you put anything on President Trump in terms of how he's conducted
Yeah,
himself?
look, Donald Trump, he creates a lot of unnecessary headlines with maybe some of the tweeting and some of the comments he says off the cuff. But that's exactly why the American people voted for the guy. Because when he was running his campaign, his message is not filtered through staff, and he speaks directly to the American people. I actually think he needs to do more of that. He needs to go out in the communities. He needs to go town by town and get his message and speak directly to the American people, because Washington, who only gave him 4% of the vote in Washington, D.C., and the entire bureaucracy is against him. So he needs to leave the Beltway, and he needs to go to the American people.
I think Trump's lawyers would argue differently. I think they think that he needs to talk less, because really he's contradicting what some of his own aides are saying, what his press people are saying. You know, he really has gotten himself into more hot water than he needs to by coming out and by being so focused on this Russia investigation that he feels like he needs to react to it all the time.
Really, you get the last word here.
What I really think is important is what is the role of a special prosecutor? And when you look back at what happened under the Nixon impeachment, Richard Nixon tried to stop. He was not impeached because of the actions that he took. Richard Nixon was impeached because he tried to stop the investigation that happened.
James,
All right, hold on,
words.
Hold on, one second. We
experienced
are
that.
obviously just getting started here, and we will pick up this discussion right after we check on the weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the week in Washington, from the Comey memo to the appointment of a special counsel in the Russia probe to President Trump's decision to give Israeli intelligence to the Russians. Our guests tonight are Christian Ziegler, a Republican state committee man, Zach Anderson of the Herald Tribune, and Rita Ferrandino of the Sarasota Democratic Party. Christian, in the last segment you said Trump needs to get out there more and talk. Zach was saying he's being advised to talk less. This is, I think, what Zach was talking about that came out today. Trump saying to the Russians when they were in the Oval Office, I just fired the head of the FBI. He was a crazy, real nut job. I face great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off. I would imagine that's the kind of thing that's going to get you into trouble.
Well, I think you have to figure out is it true or not, right?
Hold on one second. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer is not disputing the comments.
Yes.
Not disputing it, but he's probably still looking into it. But, you know, I think what you have here is, and it's frustrating for the Trump administration, because everything he does gets reported. It gets leaked, it gets reported, and then the news runs with the story. And there was a lot of stuff that the Obama administration did that never got reported, and it never got leaked because his team really held it tight. And what you have is, when you go after the bureaucracy in Washington, it puts them on notice. It's a threat to them. And I remember I was driving right after the election. This was in late November, and I heard an NPR story. They were interviewing a lady that worked for the EPA, and she said, I'm a Democrat. I was going to resign when Trump got elected, but I'm staying on board because the Democratic Party came to me and said, I can help obstruct Trump more than I can when I'm outside.
Double standard, folks?
So I'm still back to what Donald Trump said is evidence. It came out of his mouth, and he basically leaked important confidential briefings to Russia.
Rita, what was that information? What was the confidential information? What was it? What was leaked? Because if you're going to attack him on it, what was leaked?
He said it.
Well, what was
leaked?
What
was the information that was leaked?
Put out there, what the Washington Post reported, was that he told the Russians that we had some information provided by some foreign intelligence services about a potential bomb threat through a laptop. That apparently ISIS was use a bomb through a laptop on an airplane, which is an important piece of information to protect people's lives. And this is an interesting point here. So Trump is getting criticized for this within the intelligence community, apparently, as well. I think a lot of one big reason that people really like Donald Trump, that his supporters really liked him, is that he doesn't seem like a scripted person. That he really seems like to say what he really thinks, and that he seems more authentic. And that's one reason that people really responded to him. And obviously, the big downside of that is that if he's too loose with information like this, that can be a real problem. There's serious consequences.
Okay, so now we have a special counsel. It was announced tonight that former FBI Director James Comey will be testifying publicly before, I believe, the Senate Intelligence Committee. Where does this leave the Republican legislative agenda? We're not talking about where we are in terms of the health care bill, tax reform, infrastructure spending, and what about that wall? Where's the money coming from? That's not where the energy is right now on Capitol Hill.
Well, I think that the great part about having a special prosecutor is that Mueller is respected by all sides. It was a really brilliant move of Rod Rosenstein to put such a respected person in charge of this special investigation. And he's committed to bringing a due process to this whole situation so that we as the American people can move forward. And unfortunately, it's at the expense of public policy being able to move forward to help people. Because you're right, we are deeply engaged in this, largely because of what Donald Trump has said and what we're finding as evidence. And the special prosecutor is going to be able to bring order, and I think that's terrific.
Christian?
You look at the Democratic Party in the past 8 years, they've lost over 1,000 seats in state legislatures, governorships, Congress, and the White House. Over 1,000. So the American people have overwhelmingly rejected the Democrats. And now what you had is right when Trump took office, this indivisible movement came out. And their goal has been to obstruct. The Democratic Party does not want Donald Trump focused on policy. They do not want Donald Trump's policy proposals, which overwhelmingly the American people support, instituted and passed in Washington.
Hold on one second. You raise a very interesting question, which is our next subject. How is this all going to impact the midterms? Zach?
I think there's a lot of people starting to worry that it could very seriously impact the midterms. I talked to Dan Miller, former congressman for this area, Republican congressman from Bradenton, and he remembers what happened when Bill Clinton was under investigation and some of the issues that happened there and how Congress ground to a halt. Republicans took over Congress, and he thinks the Republicans could be in for some serious problems coming into the midterms. But we'll see.
But the question is whether locally. I mean,
well, that's a big question. That's a good question for Radar. Democrats really recruiting a strong candidate locally is really.
We're not just talking about the 16th congressional district, which is where we are right now, represented by Vern Buchanan. What about Gus Bilirakis in Northern Pinellas? What about Dennis Ross, who I'm a little familiar with? At what point do those seats become seats that Democrats could really aspire and have a legitimate shot at winning?
Well, I think that we've seen that we've got 3 seats in Florida, congressional seats that we did not expect would be in play. One being...
Hold on one second. Those seats have a Republican incumbent, but which Hillary Clinton won in the general election. Those are the seats that you would go after in any
I don't know that anybody thought Diaz-Balart down in Miami was going to be in play. And I think that's the kind of seats that are held by incumbent Republicans, been held by them for quite some time, that we're now seeing movement in where we hadn't seen it before. Dennis Ross, right here in our neighborhood, I think is going to be vulnerable. And we certainly know that Carlos down in Miami is going to also be a seat that's in play. So all of this does all sort of seem to add up. And again,
I think for Democrats to take over Congress, they've got to win seats like this one locally. I mean, you have a +7, +8 Republican seat. A candidate like Buchanan, who is a strong candidate, who has a lot of money at his disposal, and who has taken some stances that are more towards the middle. You have to be able to challenge somebody like that. You have to be able to put a good candidate forward, and the Democrats haven't proven that they're able to yet.
Before you jump in on this, let me just raise this as a question. Donald Trump's support among his base has been steady, and there's little evidence that it's declining. But what about those independents out there who really don't, call themselves Republicans or Democrats, but they took a flyer on Donald Trump because the economy has not been what it needs to be for them, and they want results, and as long as this keeps going on, they're not getting them.
Well, I disagree they're not getting them. You look at jobs being created since Donald Trump's been in office. You look at manufacturing, optimism in manufacturing is through the roof. The blue-collar workers that came out to vote for Donald Trump, which are Democrats, independents, and Republicans, across the board, they came out to vote. They're seeing the benefit of a Donald Trump presidency. Now, as we go forward, and as we start putting in tax reform and everything else, we're still early. We're 4 months in. as he starts implementing all of his policies, it's going to increase. And when you talk about the Democratic Party locally, it's a joke. They have no chance to take out Congressman Buchanan because he's done a great job, and really the Democratic Party is completely irrelevant.
Rita?
Well, thanks. It's always good to hear from Christian that the Democratic Party is irrelevant, since he
true.
spent most of this show talking about the power of the Democratic Party.
No, just you guys can just obstruct. You can't win at the ballot box, and you can't govern correctly. So, you know, there's numbers. 1,042 seats, a net gain for Republicans across this country in the past 8 years. Over 1,000 seats have been gained by the Republicans.
Zach, last word.
I think that you know, for Democrats to really do anything, they're going to have to win some marginal seats, some seats where Republicans are pretty strong, and you know, they've recruited some decent candidates in some of these special elections. It's yet to be seen whether they can recruit good candidates in some of these other seats and whether people want to step forward.
Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests and plus their thoughts on the week in Washington. Stay with us. President Trump is on his first foreign trip. He'll be gone for 8 days as politics over General Flynn, Robert Mueller, and James Comey continue to play out here in the States. What can we expect going forward, and can you imagine what we will be discussing next Friday? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Zach, I'm going to start with you because our conversation has gotten to how long does this have to go on, like it is now, for even seats like Vern Buchanan's become endangered?
Well, it's interesting. I looked at the Gallup tracking poll, the daily poll that shows what the president's approval rating is, and it's at 38%, which is bad. I mean, that's really bad, but it's not historically bad. George W. Bush got down into the 20s. Nixon got down into the 20s. Obama was down at 40% at one point. So I think that right now the base is still behind Trump, and in strong Republican districts, which you know locally it's a fairly strong, but it's still winnable for a great Democrat. You know, but I think that you really need to really put a lot of these seats in play. I think you're going to have to see some of this investigation really play out.
Rita?
Agreed. And I think that, you know, the last 4 months for the presidency has really been a free fall. And we've just seen issue after issue after issue, problem after problem. And these that are coming out now, these due process, that's why there was so much talk about impeachment. And the impeachment conversation is coming from Republicans. And that's because what has happened is the impeachable kinds of things that are happening are happening. Comey has serious issues.
Right.
And Michael Flynn took money from a foreign government and didn't report it. These are big, bad things, and Donald Trump was actively trying to stop those investigations.
Christian, let me ask you this. The one thing we do know right now with the special counsel is that this investigation is not going to go away. It is going to continue to make headlines, if not for months, years. At what point do you become concerned that the majorities that you're talking about, whether it's in Congress or in the State House, become endangered because, you know, the headlines will be negative, not for anybody's doing, but for what is going on in the actual investigation?
I am not worried. I actually think that Republicans need to fight back. You have the Democratic Party during Obama's administration. I didn't see a special counsel for when Hillary Clinton deleted 33,000 emails after the subpoena. Seth Rich, who's a DNC staffer that got murdered, no special counsel. No special counsel when conservatives were targeted by the IRS. And I'll tell you, I'll read a quote from Steve Bannon, which I think is very relevant, and I think Republicans need to keep in mind. If you think they're going to give you your country back without a fight, you're sadly mistaken. So what we're seeing is the Democratic Party aggressively coming out.
I will make one point. The special prosecutor was appointed by the Deputy Attorney General, who was appointed by the President of the United States.
But there's a lot of pressure by the media.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Christian Ziegler is a Republican State Committee man for Sarasota County. Zach Anderson is a politics editor at the Herald Tribune, and Rita Ferrandino is with the Sarasota County Democratic Party.